Hello, I'm Simon, and this is the Mantis Garden, which is going to get rather bigger than this very soon. I today would like to do a review of a video from a friend of mine called Juice at Juice's Arthropods. I'll put his link in the description below. He's actually a vendor in California, but he's also a YouTuber, and he has some great stuff on his channel, so always worth having a look. Well, I say great stuff. I think we have a disagreement with this next video. It is great, it is good, it is factual, but opinions may differ. Let's get on with it.
Welcome back to Juice's Arthropods. My name is Juice, and today we have an awesome episode, hopefully, about Phylocrania paradoxa, or the ghost mantis. A native to Africa mantis that is one of the easiest mantids on the planet to own, take care of, and breed. The ghost mantis was in my top 10 for 2022. Like, these guys are awesome.
And yes, before you ask, I have already sent him links where you can buy new shirts, but that's not what I'm here for. Ghost mantis is awesome. Is it? Is it really? Or does it just look weird and is common?
I have gone on long tirades about how much I cannot stand mantids.
And yet, he has tarantulas.
As far as owning them. And the reason for this is because everybody wants them and they're awful as pets.
This is serious fighting talk. Awful as pets? What do you think, babe?
Ultimately, mantids are one of those kind of things. They're like designer dogs, right? Like, everybody wants them, they're overly priced, and ultimately they'll be long dead before every other regular dog is there. They're just unfortunately not the best pet. And I know several people who do not like that opinion of mine.
You think?
But I still continue to attempt to breed them. And the reason for that is because you guys like them. And I like them too. Don't get me wrong. I love all arthropods. I have gone on long tirades about how much I cannot stand mantids, except for the ghost mantid. This particular species is user-friendly, and we're going to go on long tangents about why they have been my top favorite mantis of all times, from looks to ease of care to everything. But we're going to save all of that for a very long-dated prose. First, let's get into diet. Bugs, guys, they're mantids. Like, it doesn't really... They're like, oh, actually, no, diet is very important. This is going very well, clearly. When it comes to diet, this particular species loses a lot of points. All other mantids on the planet, like, you get an orchid, they're going to eat anything, like absolutely anything. With ghosts, these are the pickiest damn mantids you will ever own. This is honestly only their only con, but they are very picky. What this means is they're not really going to go for something unless you give them a reason to, which means you have to kind of show them everything a couple times. Like, it takes a couple times to get them on dubious.
This is something I have to agree with him on. Ghost mantis are a pain in the ass. And that's saying it mildly. They prefer flying prey. They don't really want to eat crickets. They don't want to eat locusts. They don't want to eat dubias. They don't want to eat anything unless it's flying around with wings and pretty much flies into their mouth. They're so terrible feeders. They're awful. Maybe the nymphs, you can get them to eat a bit of anything. But when they get older, they get way too picky. I really don't like them.
The best way to do this is get your ghost mantids young, because then they're accumulated to whatever you give them. If you get one that's a little bit older and the person's been feeding it only blue bottle spikes, guess what? You're going to be stuck feeding this thing as a fly. And crickets are typically the thing that people have most available to them, if not dubia.
I try to avoid crickets, or at least shot-bought crickets, as much as I can, because they can carry parasites. And if you've ever had a brown goopy stuff that's on the sides of your enclosure or even on the mesh, it's probably a bad cricket, or they've eaten too much and the mantis has actually sprayed or vomited this brown gooey liquid, and this can often result in either the mantis not growing or them actually dying.
So just keep that in mind when you are purchasing these. You want to get one a little bit younger, and you want to be able to try to hand feed it things. They're not like orchid mantids where they'll go chase down their prey. They kind of just hang at the top of the cage and they wait for it to come to them, and they're very, very picky. So just keep that in mind with this species. But otherwise, you want to have anything you want to give these guys, you can. Just note, do not give them giant hornworms. The thing is that mantids can get impacted very easily. So just know that going forward, is that if it's larger than an abdomen, do not feed it to them.
Again, this is excellent advice. Don't feed them something that is bigger than their abdomen unless you know your mantis can take it. Like this girl here would quite happily rip apart a large locust, wouldn't you, babe? And it can cause some massive problems with her. The digestive system is not very... It's not built for eating things like massive armworms. They will eventually start throwing up or get compacted, and again, they'll die.
When it comes to care, a couple things need to be met. You need to have a cage that's a minimum 3 times longer and 3 times wider than they are.
This is the standard practice with mantis keepers. I like to go a little bit bigger, and for my pet mantis like this one, they never go inside an enclosure. They get a plant and a nice little space where they live and just free roam around the room, basically.
Height is kind of the biggest requirement there. The reason for this, and not too high, and I'll explain why in a second, but the reason for this is because the way that these guys molt is they literally will hang off the top of something, and then they will hang off of their molt, which means you need to have something for their feetsies to grip onto. Otherwise, they fall and die.
Feetsies is the correct technical term here, and I suggest you use it as much as you can in everything you do.
During their molting process, they are very, very weak. This is the biggest flaw with mantids, is that like they have to hang off of the tiny crappy shell of their previous skin. It's awful. But just know that you want something that's going to give them both the width, because they're going to move around a little bit, and the height. The height is also allows them to kind of decide the temperature that they want to be. This is going to be more relevant in the humidity piece, but definitely give them elevation. So I would, if I was going to say get anything, pick taller over wider at the end of the day. But for mantids, with especially this particular species, don't go crazy with it, because they're not going to do a lot of moving.
This is quite true. I have 6 ghost mantis right up there on that shelf, and I don't think they've moved in the last 3 days.
They're going to kind of stay in one spot, and then sometimes they'll change position, but like they're not explorers, guys. They're just going to like hang there and be like, this is where I found food every time, so this is where I'm going to stay. So when it comes to what you can put them in, sky's the limit. Just make sure it's tall. So let's talk about humidity. For these, they are, the best part about them is that with most mantids, if the humidity is off, you can kill them very easy.
This is about the only redeeming feature that ghost mantis has, being able to live pretty much anywhere, unlike things like orchid mantis, which I suggest you don't buy unless you know what you're doing. If you don't get the humidity just right, you're going to kill them.
You know, orchids have very high requirements. Lots of species require very high humidity. With ghosts, what's really dope is that they can have everything from...
For the sake of people's sanity, Juice waffled on and on and on for about 2-3 minutes here about the humidity levels of the ghost mantis, which is pretty much anything you want it to be.
But if you decide to breed these guys, just keep in mind that you need to have very high heat for them. When it comes to their ooths, same thing with them in general. I keep them about 75, so about 75 to 80 degrees they need to be kept in at all times. You could probably do hotter than that, but in general, I just wouldn't. When it comes to longevity, they don't live long. About 7 months on the male side, typically maybe 9 months on the high end. You're looking at about a year. A lot of arthropods, 1 to 2 years is the max. They're really not a long-lived species, which sucks because they're a great species, which kind of we'll talk a little bit more about in the cons. When it comes to fecundity, I'm going to have to use some alternate words to keep this PG-13.
On the other hand, I'm British and can say anything.
Because first and foremost, when it comes to actually having an ooth and laying babies, it's about 40 to 50. So not a ton of babies like some can. But if you choose to breed them, there's one thing you need to understand. The pairing process takes 3 hours.
Ha! 3 hours. Drop in the ocean. I've sat here for over 20 hours watching shield mantis do their thing. And for those of you not watching in PG, I mean shagging.
Like, could be longer than that. Like 3 to 4 hours sometimes. Maybe an hour, maybe 2. But it wasn't for me. It was 3.5 hours. So if you choose to breed them,
then I suggest one of these.
Either take a lot of caffeine prior or do not do it at 10 p.m. on a Saturday like I did.
What it's not telling you is mantis like to cuddle. So they could mount each other and be sat there for several hours, 4 or 5 hours sometimes I've had them. And then they will connect, and then it's 3 or 4 hours. And guess what? The males are a bit sissy, and they also like to cuddle after. In other words, they're absolutely terrified of getting off in case she rips their head off. So be prepared for a long, long night.
Let's talk about pros. Okay, so pros are they're affordable. Like, they're crazy affordable. Everybody that breeds mantids, well, I should say, when they start breeding mantids in the beginning, they're always breeding these guys.
Funny enough, I didn't.
Because at the end of the day, they're like anywhere between like $15 and like $35. They're very, very affordable.
Please bear in mind that these prices are in Americanese, and in England, you can get them for a lot cheaper than that.
I've seen some go as high as 60, and honestly, that's not a bad deal as long as it's a local pet shop. If you have to pay shipping on top of that, that sucks. So if you're paying any more than, say, $15 to $60, don't buy them somewhere else cheaper, because honestly, these guys are super easy to breed. So that's the first pro, is the fact that they're affordable. The second pro is that if you want to get into breeding, and especially mantids, this will be the easiest species besides like maybe Carolina mantids and Chinese mantids.
So far, I've not had the opportunity to breed either of those, but I find the easiest mantis to breed is the cryptic mantis, or Sibylla pretiosa.
So if you want to get something outside of the norm to more of the rarer species, this is super easy and entry level for you, so by all means. Which leads to my third point. They are a really good gateway into some of the more exotic mantids at the end of the day, because they're very user-friendly, but you still get to kind of get that excitement of like, ooh, this is a rare mantid. So like, it's not, but it is at the same time. Another pro, they pretend to die.
That is in my list of cons. Pretending to die is not a good attribute in my opinion. It's actually a pain in the ass when something's already difficult to feed, when you're trying to give it something and it falls on its back and stays there.
Like, they'll feign death all the time, and that's hilarious. Like, that's their way of dealing with things, is to just be like, I'm dead, and they'll pretend to be a leaf, and that's always funny.
Yes, it is cute, and yes, it is funny, and yes, it is quite hilarious, but after you've seen it 7,000 times, it gets a bit laborious.
But it does also have the con, which I won't shove it on the con because it's not that big of a deal, but like, they'll pretend like they're dead, which like kind of sucks when you go in there and you're like, oh man, it died, and it just springs up and it just like flies or tries to fly. Yeah, so as far as that goes, that's adorable.
Juice and I obviously have very different opinions of what is adorable and what isn't, and death is something I don't find adorable in my creatures.
The next pro, because I forget what number we're on, they look awesome. They have so many crazy head things going on. The males have like a weird like, woo, and then like when they get wings and everything, their head thing gets even crazier. The female's got like a cool thing. They're just great. They're just a cool mantis. They look so freaking weird. And the other pro is they come in so many color variations. You've got greens and blacks and browns and any variation of pattern in between. Like, they're just all over the place in how they look, which is super cool. Like, and you know, a lot of mantids will just be like green or like whatever singular color. You can get all kinds of craziness. I've got probably 5 different colors of my own. I'm sure you're going to see a million things of Be Real that has them too. The males and females are going to be very interesting looking too. They're very sexually dimorphic, which is another pro. So like,
this is most definitely a pro.
If you do want to breed them, you can pull up a chart of male and females, and it's going to become abundantly clear which one is which. You know, you can count the body segments like some people are doing all the time, but that becomes a little bit more difficult when they're like L3, L4. Once they get to that mature phase, you're going to know immediately if it's a male or female. And last but not least on the pros list, because it is a lot of them, is that They do not require high humidity, which is the #1 killer of mantids. So that's awesome. Like, you really can't screw these guys up. Like, you can, but you probably won't. Honestly, the biggest con with these guys is that they just don't live that long. Like, maybe like a year, like 7 months for males. They're just not a long-lived species. Queen of the Damned, I think, lived like a year and a quarter. My males typically live about a year. So, like, I've seen it as low as 7 months, but...
You can improve the longevity of a mantis by monitoring its food intake and keeping them at around room temperature and not letting them get too hot. Some mantis you can add 2 to 3 months on top of their expected life.
On average, I think you're safe to say a year, but that really kind of sucks because mantids like live a really like a long lifestyle. Like, they're just a cool looking species, which is really dope. So like, once you have these and they die inevitably, that's kind of sad. Another con for them, if I had to pick one, would be the fact that, like, when it comes to breeding them, that, well, besides the fact that they take forever, they just don't have a lot of babies. Like, that's good and bad. Like, if you're not catching these wild, like, you're not getting them wild caught. They're almost exclusively captive bred because they're so easy to breed. But the downside is, like, if you want to breed them, you're not going to have, like, the 400 babies that some of them have. You're looking at probably, like, anywhere between 10 to 50, on average about 40 to 50.
You can trust me now that if you're not doing this for a living, 40 to 50 mantis nymphs can be quite a tricky thing to take care of.
So, like, it just, that kind of sucks a little bit. And I would say the only other con for them is that they're mantids, and they can't help that. But mantids as a whole are just kind of a pain in the ass as far as being a creature goes.
I have killed for less.
But that's really it. I mean, otherwise, like, if you want a starter mantis, you want something that's affordable, you want it to be cute, you want it to come in different colors, and you kind of don't know what that color pattern is going to be until they're a little bit older, like I think like L2, L3, like, this is a great starter species. They're just really cool. But, oh, and I'm sorry, one last con, and this is a big one. It's that damn pesky eating thing. That sucks. Like, it sucks so bad when, like, you get them and all your other mantids are just like, you could toss a dubia at their feet and they're catching them, and the ghosts just stare at you like you're a moron. That is a huge con. So, picky eaters. But other than that, that's totally reasonable. And honestly, overall, I would say 7 out of 10 as far as like an arthropod goes. So, really good species.
Well, thank you, Juice, on your insights of the ghost mantis and what you think about it. Of course, I don't agree with the ghost mantis being such a fantastic species. If you want a decent species and some that are actually fun and interesting, then I'd go for something like a Mantis lineola, which is the African line mantis, or even a shield mantis. They're much more fun, they're much more interactive, they don't play dead, and they certainly won't just mess with their food. Anyway, thanks to Juice. His link's in the description below. I suggest you go and have a look at his channel because he's a really cool guy actually, and I'm just having fun here. Please visit his channel and have a look, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.